Hi everyone, Michael Sandler here, best-selling author and your host on Inspire Nation. Check out our website where we'll be posting podcasts, tips, videos, blogs, and more at inspirenationshow.com. Today we have a very special guest. Her name is Betsy Chasse. She's an internationally known filmmaker and author, most notably for co-writer, director, and producer of What the Bleep Do We Know. In 2014, she produced the acclaimed Song in the New Earth, which premiered at the Seattle International Film Festival. She's authored 4 books, including What the Bleep Do We Know, Discovering the Endless Possibilities to Altering Your Everyday Reality, and in 2014, Tipping Sacred Cows. She writes often for Huffington Post, Modern Mom, and Intent.com. She is currently in production of a new feature documentary about coaching featuring Jack Canfield, John Gray, and Marcy Shimoff. Welcome to the show, Betsy. Are you ready to shine?
Yes, I hope I'm already shining.
Woohoo! I think you
shine.
are. and you're there outside in your favorite red rocking chair.
I know.
How could you not be shining?
It's true. I work here. I write here. This is my spot. So I work really hard to create this sort of lush as we can because we're in California and there's a drought environment that I can create with. And I have my birds and my kitty cats and my dogs and everyone. We all kind of hang out. And it's gloomy today here. We've got June gloom in July for Southern California, but I'm enjoying it actually.
Can we get any moisture out of the June gloom?
God, that would be so great, but no. Sadly, it's just clouds. Yeah, it's just clouds.
I was hearing the birds before we started, and I was syncing up our audio, and it was so cool to see the birds chirping on my recorder. So I'm hoping that on cue, they will come in and join us.
They might. Sometimes they do. When I get going on something, there's a few birds around here that will start making a lot of noise, and it's them like, they clearly either agree or they're not agreeing. I talk to them often. I have corn growing. I don't know if anybody can see it, but in my back row I have corn and
beautiful
sunflowers, and so I go back there and talk to them all the time because, they have a lot of input. They have a lot to say.
That makes sense. We were on book tour 4 or 5 years ago. I don't know. It's a blur at this point. And we had met up with one of our good friends, Robert Mirabal. He's a 2-time Grammy Award-winning flautist from the Taos Pueblo. And he had given us native indigenous corn seeds. And we planted them, found ourselves out on book tour. And so we had these planters with us that were pulling out of the trailer every day at each motel as we grew corn on our journey.
That is awesome. I don't know that I would go that far, but I love growing food. I love that. I mean, this year it's a little strange because I planted different things that I would normally plant, but I'm kind of exploring, pumpkin. I used to, when I lived in Washington State, had a big garden with pumpkins and corn, but here in California, I'm just kind of trying different things. I mean, of course, I have the tomatoes and the herbs and all that kind of stuff, but I love gardening. For me, gardening is a meditation. People always ask me, well, what is your practice? And I'm not typically a disciplined practicer, but I do find that walking around and touching what I'm growing and digging my hands in the dirt and planting seeds is a really peaceful, meditative practice for me.
My wife would completely agree. That's her solace. That's her it makes it feel grounded and at peace. Mm-hmm. For myself, maybe I'm a little bit more of the young side of things on this one. So when we were struggling with our health in Maui, which we moved from Maui a few months ago, and the air just didn't feel right in the house, I'd go outside and we had some beautiful cactus growing that we were actually being rained out. And so the cactus were being overgrown with weeds. Mm. And so I enjoyed pulling the weeds.
It's great. It's a great metaphor for life, gardening, to me, because you think about it, you got to plant a seed, you've got to care for it, you've got to, what are you planting together? Like, I'm one of those, plant carrots with tomatoes, or plant, what plants work really well together, mm-hmm. and then help it so you don't get as many weeds, or, what weeds, when you're pulling the weeds. It's all part of life. It's what you're doing in life, really.
Oh, and it's interesting because I'm coming at it from this place of, bless my food, give thanks for this, give that, so that growing, and yet I'm pulling weeds. And so I'm going, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I'm not. I say thank you, but this is not where you're going to grow. You're not welcome here. it's funny when I moved into the house that I'm in, I think that it had been empty for a little while.
Hmm.
Um, and it had this big play structure in the back. And all the creatures had moved in. Like we had possums and squirrels, and birds had built bird nests all through the play structure.
Oh, wow.
And it was an interesting first couple of weeks because my cat had got attacked by a possum, and there was this whole, I had to come back in the backyard and, look at this possum because then my dog, I share a story about it in my book. The dog gets a possum. And so I had to come into the backyard and just sit down and just say, listen, everybody, we all have to find a way to get along in here. You don't have to leave just because we moved in, but you're going to have to realize that these animals now are welcome. And so we all have to just work it out. And it was interesting because it sort of mellowed out in the yard. Like the birds kind of didn't completely disappear, but they sort of
Yeah.
moved out of the play structure because the kids were playing in the play structure. And we all kind of found new places to be, and we all found our own little niche again. But it was really funny in the beginning because I think the yard was just really, the animals, all creatures all knew this yard was safe. And so they kind of, so now I can look up and I have a possum. His name is Henry. He walks by every now and then. And we have squirrels, and now the squirrels and the dogs play this fun. We have power lines behind us. The squirrels and the dogs play the fun game of the squirrel gets in the middle of the power line and goes like neater, 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 and then the dogs twist it back and forth, and they just have, it's like a total blast out here now. So,
Excellent, excellent. I like
and
it.
it's
You.
peaceful to watch. You just kind of, it's, if I'm writing or I'm working,
Hmm.
and we have doves, and the doves will come and sit together, and I can always look up and go, oh, hey doves, how's it going? It's like, for me, it's like my own little world.
Little sanctuary.
Yeah.
I like it. I
Yeah.
like it. And I think being outdoors, if you can find a way to do that, most people either haven't tried it or haven't found a way to do it. What a creative space you've got if you can get outdoors.
Yeah. Well, for me, being out, I mean, I'm barefoot all the time, and I feel like even just being outside, I mean, it gets really hot here.
Hmm.
I mean, of course, probably get other places, but we, in the summer we can get up to 100 degrees, and it's nice because I have air conditioning in the house. But I still would rather just be out. Oh, one of my little birds landed. There's another. Um, it just being outside, being in the trees. I mean, I live in the city, so it's not like we have great trees, but just listening. There's a sort of gentle calming that comes from just getting quiet and listening. And even for me, there's a train, you might hear it. There's a train that goes by, and I love hearing that train, the whistle of the train. It just sort of like moves my heart. Do you hear the dove? He's over there. Hi, dove. He's back there. And it's just getting the sounds. I mean, I close my eyes and I can hear even the trash truck go by, and I can hear, and it kind of just puts me into a really relaxed, calm, creative space, especially if you're going to be writing or doing something creative.
Have you always had a space like this?
I think so. I think I've always worked to create. I lived when I was in my 20s. I lived in this apartment down near Hollywood, and it had this teeny tiny backyard that was probably like a 4x4 deck area.
Hmm.
And I literally dug up the concrete and planted sunflowers and pumpkins in it. And basically took away half of like the sitting area to make this little like small 2x2 foot bed. And then I just put two chairs out there. And I remember one night I was sitting back there, and I had a little teeny tiny chimenea and my little garden and my two chairs and a small table. And this grasshopper came and he landed on one of my sunflowers, and he just sat there, and for like 2 hours, I just sat there and stared at the grasshopper and watching the sun kind of go down around the city, all the apartment buildings blocking it here and there. But, I've really always wanted to create that space.
And I think animals, like I had earlier today, before a series of interviews today, had a butterfly fly that hopped up and it traveled hitchhiked with me for a walk with my wife.
Oh, nice.
And
That's great.
when they come along, when the grasshopper comes to you, when the butterfly, if we can be present in those moments, they're there as little gifts.
Right. Well, I think, I have hummingbird feeders because we have a lot of hummingbirds, and, I mean, I, the people will say, hummingbirds are the messengers to the other side, to the spirit world. And I don't know if that's true or not true, but I do know that whenever a hummingbird comes to one of my feeders, it I instantly look up. Like you see me now, like doing this because I'll just go see what everybody's doing. Like the hummingbird sitting over there now. And what it does for me is it's not a negative distraction. It's a moment of reflection. It's a
Hmm.
moment of seeing deeper in. And I appreciate those moments because otherwise, we're busy people. I mean, I stare at a computer screen all day long. I work all day long. I'm a mom. I got two kids running around. And so for me, nature is the reminder to check out for a minute. It's like if I set a timer on my phone that said, okay, every 5 minutes you're going to do something, you're going to look up. For me, that's one of the things that I love about being outside is that every 5 minutes there's some new sound that can draw me out, and I can just enjoy it. And like watching a hummingbird sit. I mean, the coolest thing is watching a hummingbird sit because they're so, and that reminds me of me. And so it's like, oh, the hummingbird is sitting. I'm going to sit for a minute.
I like it. I like it. And
Yeah.
then when
And
they get going, that sound, the sound
yeah,
goes right through you.
right. Well, and especially when your lives get really busy
Hmm.
and you do so much. Like I was literally talking to my honey this morning about, I just kind of said, God, I haven't really been having a peaceful mind lately. And it's because I've got so much that I'm doing. And he just said, you have to really get that time in, even if it's every hour, 5 minutes or whatever it's going to be to take that practice in, because otherwise your thought monsters, I call them thought monsters, can just run you ragged. I got to do this, I got to do that, I got to do that. I'm 2 weeks ahead of myself scheduling and these things on. And you know that's where stress and anxiety and sickness come from. And so of just forcing myself, even if I don't, some days
Hmm.
I have time in the morning to get up and meditate, and sometimes I don't. I have little kids, so they decide what time I get up, especially in the summer. Um, and so just not being so rigid and saying, oh, I didn't do my morning meditation, I'm screwed for the rest of the day.
Oh no.
Just going like, okay, I didn't do this morning meditation, but you
Hmm.
know what? In 20 minutes, I'm going to go weed the garden for 10 minutes, or I'm going to do this. And giving myself that moments within the day calms everything, not just your mind. It calms your heart. It calms your heart rate. It calms your breathing, all those things that we need for a healthy life.
I love it. And it's so important to be able to either take those pauses or recognize that we're not taking the pause so that then we can feed it back. It's mindfulness, feed it back into ourselves.
Right. Right.
So let's dive back a little bit
Okay.
because I had real fun with your book. Um,
Mm,
no stone is left safe. Maybe is the best way to describe it.
right.
You've
Well, it's
dashed,
called dipping sacred cows for a reason.
yeah, and I mean, from somebody who's wrote what the bleep, it is so far removed from what you would ever expect to hear, and beautiful, because I know for myself I've had sacred cows. I'm a best-selling author, I'm a this, I'm a that, and you get to that moment, that holy shit moment
Right.
where you go, am
What does
I,
all this mean?
yes, and am I living what I'm teaching others when you look
Right.
in the mirror? So, if you can share a little bit of backstory for us about what happened prior to the big
Right.
E word.
Well, so mine is an funny journey, and like everybody's, we always have people. We just life is a trip, man. And so here I get on this movie. What the bleep do we know? It wasn't even called What the Bleep then. It was called something else, and I hadn't read a spiritual book to save my life. I mean, for me, I was living happily in what I call my shoe consciousness,
Hmm.
which is what kind of shoes am I wearing? What kind of car am I driving? And that was my world for a really long time. And then something happened back then. I talk about it in the book that I didn't quite understand, but I had a big shift where I was like, this, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to make crappy movies that nobody sees and doesn't do anything for humanity. And then all of a sudden, Bleep came along, and it was a real genuine quest from all three of us filmmakers. I think people always ask, why was that movie so beloved? And I think it was because we were genuine and authentic in our search for answers. And so the bleep comes out, and all of a sudden, I'm like a guru, and I'm like, look, I just made the movie, man. I mean, like, and but people were really interested in what I had to say. And all of a sudden I'm like opening for Deepak and opening, being traipsed all around the world, being paid lots of money to talk about how to be enlightened. And I got to be really honest with you, for a while that was totally fun. That was awesome. Like it's kind of, ego stroking to fly first class and get paid a lot of money and stand up in front of a lot of people and tell them how to be happy. And but at least for me, and I think for a lot of people, that is only good for so long.
Hmm.
That's only fulfilling for so long before you start to go, something isn't right here. And for me, I started to look at what I was saying versus what my life was. And I realized that there was a big disconnect. And I also felt like there were big disconnects in what I was talking about. Like some of the things I talk about in the book are like kill the ego, living in bliss, some of the spiritual buzzwords. Those are some of the sacred
Yeah.
cows in the book. And I really wanted to know, like, well, is it possible? What does it mean when they say live in bliss? What does it mean, the law of attraction? What do these things really mean? And do they really work? And is it possible? And am I really doing the work necessary to do that? And I found that the truth was I wasn't really living my true authentic self.
How
And
did how
I
did
was
you did you find this out? It seems like from the book you almost woke up one morning and
right.
woke up.
Well, I mean, it's not like it just happened overnight. What happens, I think, is that just to do a little bit of a nerd out, what I understand, like
Yeah.
one of the big things from Bleep was the idea that we create our reality.
Hmm.
Now, it's not so much, and I know lots of people want to say that we're literally creating the chair that we're sitting in. Well, not really. We went and bought the chair at the store because we liked the color. And so there's some mass to mass action occurring. It's not like we magically, when I leave this house, the chair is still here. Um, but what we are doing really is creating our perception of reality.
Hmm.
We get to decide how we perceive reality. And that perception is based on what we believe, our beliefs.
So in other words, whether you like the chair or not.
Right. Oh, I get to decide whether I like the chair or I don't like the chair. But the chair is the chair. We attach, humans are a meaning attaching machine.
Hmm.
That's how our brain works. We can't process without attaching a meaning to every single thing literally we're going meaning, 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 meaning all the time. And so what I began to see so what happens is that your life is just a reflection of your belief system. And what I began to realize was that I wasn't happy in my life because the beliefs that I was projecting weren't serving me anymore. And so to get clarity on what I believe, because if I'm really going to create my life, then I should really know what I believe. And so I began to examine my sacred cows. And in beginning to examine your sacred cows,
Yeah.
you're going to find you have a lot of them that are not serving you. And as you do that, you begin to throw things to change. For me, it started with where I was living, my marriage, my career, everything. I began to really take stock of and go, is this really true? And do I want this?
Uh-oh.
And things started to fall away.
Did they naturally fall away from asking the question, or did it asking the correct question create, I don't know if I want to call it an energetic shift, but maybe an earthquake that that broke things loose?
Well, I don't know. It's sort of like the chicken and the egg. It's a long process.
Yeah.
And I think people always say to me, when did you get on there? And I always say the moment I came out of the vagina. You're on a journey always. And, hopefully you can become self-reflective. So I've always been self-reflective. I've always been the one to step back and check in and go, wait a second, is this bullshit or is this real? Like, who are you really being? I've always been that person. And so, for me, one of the things that was sort of we have a typically go into crisis. Big shifts happen when we have a crisis most of the time. And my big crisis was divorce. That was the big thing that finally shook me into,
Hmm.
okay. And so the beginning was leading into the decision of getting divorced. And that's still part of the process. That was the beginning of, is this meaningful? Is this what I want? That's the beginning of the conversation. Then once the divorce happened, it was like, well, everything is pretty much cracked wide open at this point. I might as well just go all the way and just see what can I find in myself? Because I wasn't really willing to go back. I wasn't really willing to say, okay, I got divorced. Now I'll just rebuild my life again. I wanted to say, I'm not going to rebuild my life from the same building blocks that I built the last one from. That's just crazy.
How
But
do you
that's
do that
often
though?
what we do. Well, you do that because for me,
Yeah.
there's a game at the end of my book called My Life Sucks. And what I did is